All right, so if you're in a leadership role, you know you spend a ton of time thinking about the big picture, right? The strategy. But let's talk about the thing that actually makes that strategy come to life. And, spoiler alert, it's not some fancy mission statement or a killer slide deck, it's your budget. Today, we're going to flip the script on budgeting. We're going to stop thinking of it as this, painful accounting chore and start seeing it for what it really is, your single most powerful blueprint for performance.
So let's start with a big question, one that keeps a lot of leaders up at night. Why do so many great strategies fail? I mean, think about it. Every single year, brilliant, game-changing ideas are born in boardrooms, but the data shows a huge number of them they fizzle out. They stall somewhere between the whiteboard and the real world. It's not because the ideas were bad, so what's going on here? What's the big disconnect?
Well, the answer is actually surprisingly simple. They're missing a clear blueprint for how to get it done. There's this great saying that a vision without resources is just a hallucination. And that's really the heart of it. The budget, that's the bridge. It's the thing that connects your big, ambitious goals to what your team actually does every single day. It's how you turn ambition into a real, funded, actionable plan.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of turning that high-level strategy into on-the-ground reality. Because, this is where the real work of leadership happens. It's all about allocating your capital, your people, and your focus to the things that truly matter.
So, at its most basic level, this is what a budget is. It's a written estimation of financial performance. But honestly, that definition is kind of dry. A better way to think about it? A budget is a financial story you're writing about the future. It's your plan, but told with numbers. It forces you, and this is key, it forces you to make tough choices, to literally put a dollar value on what you say your priorities are. And it gives you a clear benchmark so you know if you're winning or not.
All right, if the budget is our blueprint, then the next logical question is, how do we actually draw it up? And that brings us to the budgeting process. And listen, this is so much more than just crunching numbers in a spreadsheet. It's a really critical management process that has a bunch of interconnected goals.
And this right here is what I'm talking about. This list really elevates budgeting way beyond simple accounting. I mean, look at these aims. Yeah, of course, you've got planning and control. That's the obvious stuff. But look at the others. Communication, coordination, motivation. These are just as important. Think about it this way. If a company decides to double its R&D budget, what message does that send? It screams to everyone, from the engineers to the marketing team, that radical innovation is now the top priority, not just tiny improvements. It coordinates all their efforts, it authorizes them to spend, and it motivates them with super clear targets. That's powerful stuff.
And this visual here does a great job of showing that budgeting isn't a one-and-done kind of thing. It's not something you set in January and then forget about until December. Not at all. It's a living, breathing, continuous cycle. You plan, you execute, you monitor how you're doing against that plan, and this is the most important part. You learn from what happened. That learning then feeds right back into your next planning cycle. So you get smarter and more accurate every single time you go around.
So let's break that cycle down into 5 clear phases. First up, you agree on your goals, making sure they're totally aligned with the overall strategy. Next, you develop the draft budget. This is where the number crunching happens. Then, and this is super critical, you review it and get buy-in from everyone. Once it's approved, it's go time. You implement and monitor. And finally, the step that so many people forget, you document and you learn. Like, imagine a project manager realizes they always underestimate the cost of software integration. If they document that, they can use that data to make their next project budget way more accurate. That's how you build institutional memory.
Okay, now just like any master builder has a whole toolbox for different jobs, there are different philosophies when it comes to building a budget. And the method you choose, it actually says a lot about your company's culture and what your strategic priorities really are.
So the 2 main approaches you'll hear about are traditional and zero-based. Traditional is basically incremental. You take last year's numbers, maybe tweak them a bit, and you're good to go. It's familiar, it's pretty easy. Zero-based, on the other hand, is a total reset. It's like starting with a completely blank piece of paper. You assume nothing. Every single dollar for every single line item has to be justified from scratch every single year. You can imagine a stable, predictable utility company using a traditional approach. But what about a tech startup that's pivoting to a whole new market? They absolutely need zero-based budgeting to challenge every single old assumption and make sure every dollar is pointed at that new vision.
So, the big question, which one is better for you? Well, it really depends on your situation. Traditional budgeting, that's great for stability, and it's way simpler. But its big weakness is that it can just keep old, inefficient habits alive.
You know that classic use it or lose it mentality, where departments spend money just so their budget doesn't get cut next year? That's a product of traditional budgeting. Now, zero-based is an incredibly powerful tool if you're in a turnaround situation or you need to make a massive strategic shift. But, and this is a big but, you gotta be warned, it is super time-consuming, and it can be a huge culture shock if your team isn't ready for that level of scrutiny.
All right, so we've got a process and we've got a philosophy. Let's get practical now and see how all the different kinds of budgets actually fit together to make one cohesive financial plan for the whole company.
So when you get down to it, you're mostly going to be working with three main types of budgets. First, you've got your operating budget. Think of this as the fuel for your daily engine. It covers all the day-to-day stuff, from sales revenue to salaries. Then there's the capital budget. This is for the big moves, the huge long-term investments, like building a new factory or funding a massive digital transformation project. And last, but definitely not least, is the cash budget. This is your absolute lifeline. It tracks the actual cash coming in and going out, making sure you can, pay your bills and keep the lights on. They all do different jobs, but as you're about to see, they are all deeply connected.
And this flowchart here shows how it all comes together in what we call the master budget. Now, I really want you to focus on one thing here, the crucial starting point, right there at the top, the sales budget. Your sales forecast, your best guess at future sales, is the single most important number in this whole process. It's the engine. It's the first domino that knocks over all the others.
Okay, so let's follow the flow here. That sales forecast, that number tells you exactly how much you need to produce. That, in turn, creates your budgets for materials and for labor. It also tells you how much you're going to need to spend on administrative stuff. So, let's say a car company is forecasting a 20% jump in sales. This whole model translates that one number into real-world action. It tells them how many more batteries they need to order, how many more people to hire for the assembly line, and hey, maybe it's even time to fund that new factory through the capital budget. See how it all connects? All these smaller budgets then roll up to create your projected financial statements. It's literally a complete, interconnected financial model of your entire strategy.
Okay, let's bring this all home. The big takeaway here is that budgeting is not some back-office accounting function. For any effective leader, it has to be a frontline, strategic activity. It is, quite simply, how you lead.
So from now on, think of your budget as your #1 leadership tool. You use it to communicate what really, truly matters. You use it to coordinate all those complex moving parts across different teams. You use it to authorize action, to empower your people to go out and get the job done. You use it to control your resources, making sure every dollar is spent for the highest possible impact. And of course, you use it to motivate your team and evaluate performance. This right here is where your big picture strategy becomes day-to-day reality.
So the next time you have to approach a budget cycle, please don't think of it as just another spreadsheet you have to fill out. Think of it as the single document where you are laying out your plan to win. It is the blueprint for your success. So the only question left is, what's your blueprint going to look like?